Can AI learn to use tools? Well, maybe not physical ones, but based on this research, now AI can learn to use digital tools like APIs. Large language models show impressive capabilities even in few or zero-shot settings when it comes to natural language processing tasks, and they have also been observed to have emergent capabilities. But one of the struggles with using LLMs is their limitations that hinder their use day to day. For example, mathematical reasoning, inability to access latest information, and understanding the progression of time. One of the solutions that was offered to overcome this problem has been to use external tools, for example APIs, to cover these limitations. But so far, this solution has been implemented manually and through human annotation, which makes the solution basically unscalable. Toolformer, which is a model that is developed at Meta AI Research, is a model that has trained to understand which API to use when. For Toolformer, researchers made a question answering API, the Wikipedia API, a calculator, and a machine translation API available. Toolformer was trained on this specially made dataset. This dataset consisted of sentences that was annotated with API calls. Here are some examples. The name derives from La Tortuga, the Spanish word for turtle. As you see here before the word turtle, the machine translation API is called. MT pointing to the machine translation API, the input is Tortuga, and the result turtle is also annotated. This dataset was made using in-context learning capabilities of language models to generate datasets from scratch. To make this dataset, given each sentence, the researchers made the language model determine where in this text an API call can be made or a question can be asked. For example, in the example sentence, out of 1,400 participants, 400 or 29% passed the test. An API call can be made before 29% for a calculator to come up with the percentage. This annotation is done by instructing the model to find places in the text where a question can be placed. To train the model to do that, the instruction that is given to the model is like this. Your task is to add calls to a question answering API to a piece of text. The questions should help you get information required to complete the text. You can call the API by writing QA question, where question is the question you want to ask. Here are some examples of API calls, and giving it a couple of examples of how that is done. Once all the locations where a question can be asked is determined, all of these API calls are actually done. And once we have the results of the API calls, we filter these API calls to see which ones were useful at the end. Useful here means that it helps us determine or predict what the next token in the sentence should be. If it doesn't help us, as in if it's not useful, we remove this API call from this dataset. The language model that helped us create this dataset is then fine-tuned on this newly created dataset using a standard language modeling objective. So basically, the model that created the dataset is being fine-tuned on its own feedback. During inference time, the model runs to perform its decoding until the special arrow token is produced. Then the necessary API is called to get the result. Toolformer is a GPT-J model fine-tuned on this newly created API annotated dataset. Over many downstream tasks such as question answering, mathematical reasoning, and masked language modeling, Toolformer performs better than GPT-J, which itself is based on GPT-3. So it basically shows us that being able to call external tools like APIs helps this model perform better. One interesting takeaway from this paper is that even though larger models are able to use the APIs effectively to improve the model performance, smaller models that are trained on this newly created API dataset are not able to use the APIs effectively. And even though as the model size gets bigger, the model performance gets much better without even the help of APIs, the ability to choose and use APIs definitely gives models a clear advantage. It's very interesting to see how AI is progressing in a couple of different branches. Over the last year, we've seen big leaps achieved by human feedback-assisted AI, and now we are seeing AI feedback-assisted AI. But what do you think of Toolformer? Do you think it can elevate the capabilities of large language models to use them in everyday life? Leave a comment and let us know. And I'll see you in the next video.